Hey everyone, it's Sophia. I'm so excited to share something with you all today. Something that just completely made my day. You see, I've been meaning to create a new playlist for ages, one that's just bursting with good vibes, you know? And guess what? I finally did it. I spent a good chunk of the morning carefully selecting songs, adding some old favorites and discovering some amazing new tracks. Honestly, it felt like magic watching the playlist come together. And then, I pressed play, and you will not believe what happened next. I literally jammed to it all day. From doing chores around the house to working on my laptop, the music just filled the air with such positive energy. I was singing along, dancing in my chair, the whole 9 yards. I felt so light and happy, like I was walking on sunshine. It was one of those days where everything just felt right. So, let's begin our exciting journey of English improvement together. Remember, I release new videos daily focusing on English speaking and listening skills to help you improve and enjoy your learning journey. Okay, so, you know how sometimes you get this itch, this urge to try something completely new? Something that scares you just a tiny bit, but also excites you in a way you can't quite explain? Well, that's exactly how I felt about rock climbing. I'd seen pictures, you know, those incredible shots of people clinging to sheer cliffs, muscles rippling, looking like absolute superheroes. And part of me, a very small, very hidden part, thought, I could do that. But then, the other, more dominant part of me, the one that trips over air, would chime in with a resounding, "Oh honey, no. You can barely climb a ladder without getting vertigo." So, for the longest time, it stayed a quiet dream, a whisper in the back of my mind. Until my friend Sarah, this absolute force of nature, decided she wanted to try it. And of course, she dragged me along. Now, picture this. It's a crisp Saturday morning, the kind where the air smells like fallen leaves and promise. We arrive at this climbing gym, and, whoa, it's not what I expected. I kind of envisioned something small and dusty, you know? But this place is huge. Towering walls, every color imaginable, studded with these colorful rock-like things. Holds, I later learned they're called. They were all shapes and sizes. Some looked like giant gummy bears, others like tiny, precarious ledges. The air hummed with the sound of chalk bags being patted, ropes swishing, and the occasional excited yell. It was intimidating, to say the least. My palms started sweating just looking at it. Sarah, of course, was bouncing on the balls of her feet, practically vibrating with excitement. "Isn't this amazing?" she squealed, already pulling on her climbing shoes. These shoes, by the way, are a story in themselves. They're like elf slippers. Super tight, pointed, and frankly, a little bit ridiculous looking. I fumbled with mine, feeling like my toes were being held hostage. First, there was the belaying lesson. Now, this was where the real nerves kicked in. Belaying, for those who don't know, and at that point, I certainly didn't, is basically the art of controlling the rope for your climbing partner, making sure they don't, you know, plummet to their doom. The instructor, this laid-back guy with a reassuring smile and biceps the size of my head, explained it all very calmly. Click the carabiner here, feed the rope through there, keep your hand on the brake. Easy peasy, right? Wrong. My brain felt like scrambled eggs. All these knots and ropes and commands, it was a lot to take in. "So," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "if I mess this up, Sarah becomes a pancake?" He laughed, assuring me that with practice, it would become second nature. Practice. Right. Finally, it was time to climb. Sarah went first, like a little monkey, zipping up the wall with this effortless grace. She made it look so easy. I watched her, a mixture of awe and sheer terror churning in my stomach. Then, it was my turn. I chalked up my hands, the chalk feeling cool and dry against my sweaty palms. I stared at the wall, this multicolored, textured beast, trying to plan my route. Okay, hand here, foot there, then reach for that blue one. It looked so straightforward from the ground. But the moment my feet left the floor, everything changed. Suddenly, the holds seemed miles apart. The wall loomed over me, vast and daunting. My arms started to burn. My legs wobbled. My breathing became shallow. "You got this," Sarah called from below, her voice echoing through the gym. Easy for her to say, she was practically glued to the ceiling. I inched my way up, clinging to the holds like a desperate koala. Every movement felt awkward, clumsy. My muscles screamed in protest. I could feel my fear rising, threatening to overwhelm me. There was one point, about halfway up, where I just froze. I couldn't move up, and I couldn't move down. I was stuck, suspended between the ground and the heavens, with my heart hammering against my ribs. Just breathe, Sarah's voice floated up to me. You're doing great. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and tried to ignore the trembling in my limbs. Slowly, carefully, I reached for the next hold. It was a small one, barely big enough for my fingertips. But I gripped it, putting all my weight on it, praying it wouldn't break. And then, somehow, I managed to pull myself up. Inch by agonizing inch, I continued my ascent. Each successful move felt like a small victory, each hold, a lifeline. And finally, after what felt like an eternity, I reached the top. The feeling of accomplishment that washed over me was incredible. I had done it. I, the girl who tripped over air, had climbed a wall. I looked down, a little dizzy from the height, but grinning from ear to ear. Sarah was cheering, giving me a thumbs up. The instructor nodded approvingly. Even some of the other climbers offered encouraging smiles. The descent was, well, less graceful. I kind of slid down the last few feet, landing on the mat with a thump. My arms were shaking, my legs were jelly, and my fingers were raw, but I didn't care. I had climbed a wall. A real, actual wall. You know, it's funny. Looking back, I don't remember the specific moves I made, or the exact route I took. What I remember is the feeling. The fear, the exhilaration, the sense of pushing myself beyond my limits. The feeling of accomplishment, of overcoming a challenge. And the surprising realization that, maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as clumsy as I thought. After that first climb, I was hooked. Of course, I still had, and have, moments of sheer terror. I still fumble and fall and sometimes feel like a complete klutz. But I keep going back. Because every time I climb, I learn something new. About myself, about my limits, about the strange and wonderful joy of conquering fear. And you know what? It's not just about the physical challenge. It's about the mental game too. It's about learning to trust yourself, to believe in your own strength, even when your hands are shaking and your legs are screaming. It's about finding that quiet strength inside you, the one that whispers, yes, you can. So, if you're ever feeling that itch, that urge to try something new, something that scares you a little, I highly recommend giving rock climbing a go. You might surprise yourself. You might discover a hidden strength you never knew you had. And who knows, you might even find yourself clinging to the ceiling, grinning like a crazy person. Just, maybe invest in some good climbing shoes. Those elf slippers are no joke. Okay, so grab a cuppa, settle in, because this is a story, a saga really, about my epic battle with a piece of software. It wasn't a fire-breathing dragon or an evil sorcerer, but trust me, it felt like it at times. This software, we'll call it Creativo, was supposed to revolutionize my workflow, make everything smoother, faster, more sparkly. You know, all the promises they make in those glossy online ads. The reality, well, let's just say it was a little less shimmering. See, I'm a bit of a creature of habit. I like my trusty old programs, the ones I've used for years, with their familiar buttons and predictable quirks. They're like comfy old slippers, you know? But Creativo was like being handed a pair of stilettos when you're used to walking barefoot. Shiny, yes, potentially fabulous, sure, but utterly terrifying. I downloaded the free trial, full of optimism. The website was all sleek lines and minimalist design, promising a user-friendly experience. Intuitive interface, they said. Effortless creation, they claimed. Famous last words. The download itself took an eternity. My laptop whirred like a small airplane preparing for takeoff, the fan blowing hot air onto my hand. The smell of warm electronics, you know that smell? Filled the air. Finally, the little icon appeared on my desktop, gleaming invitingly. I clicked, and then, nothing. Just a blank white screen. I clicked again. Still nothing. I started to feel that familiar prickle of panic. Had I downloaded the wrong thing? Was my computer about to explode? Dramatic, I know, but that's how it felt. After what felt like an hour, probably more like 5 minutes, a loading bar finally appeared, crawling across the screen at a glacial pace. I swear, I could practically hear snails cheering it on. Eventually, the software opened, revealing an interface that looked like it had been designed by aliens. Buttons were everywhere, menus nested within menus, cryptic icons scattered across the screen like a digital hieroglyphic puzzle. My comfy slippers suddenly felt very far away. My first instinct, of course, was to click everything. Don't judge me, we've all been there. And guess what? It worked, sort of. I accidentally stumbled upon a tutorial, hidden away in some obscure submenu. The tutorial itself was narrated by a woman with a voice so soothing it could cure insomnia. She spoke in hushed tones, as if revealing ancient secrets. Welcome to the world of Creativo, she whispered. Prepare to unleash your inner artist. Right then, my inner artist was mainly feeling bewildered. The tutorial blitzed through a series of complex functions at warp speed. I frantically scribbled notes, my hand cramping, trying to keep up. Layers, masks, blending modes, it was a whole new language. I felt like I'd been dropped into a cooking show where everyone else was a Michelin-starred chef and I was still trying to figure out how to boil an egg. The next few days were a blur of frustration, punctuated by the occasional, fleeting moment of triumph. I'd spend hours trying to achieve a simple effect, only to end up with something that looked like a toddler had attacked my screen with crayons. I deleted more projects than I saved. The undo button became my best friend. The smell of coffee became a permanent fixture in my workspace, fueling my late-night struggles. There were tears. Oh yes, there were tears. One particularly memorable evening, after wrestling with a particularly stubborn animation for 3 hours straight, I just lost it. I slumped back in my chair, staring at the mockingly blank screen, and let out a frustrated sob. My cat, bless her furry little heart, came and sat on my lap, purring sympathetically. She didn't understand Creativo, but she understood misery. But you know what? I'm stubborn. I'd paid for a year's subscription, and I was determined to get my money's worth. So, I kept at it. I watched more tutorials, at a much slower speed this time. I joined online forums, asking questions that probably seemed ridiculously basic to the seasoned Creativo users. I even started following a few Creativo gurus on social media, marveling at their seemingly effortless creations. And slowly, very slowly, things started to click. I began to understand the logic behind the alien interface. I learned the secret handshake of layers and masks. I even managed to create a few things that didn't look half bad. The feeling of accomplishment when I finally mastered a new technique was exhilarating. It was like climbing a mountain and reaching the summit, breathing in the crisp, clean air of victory. There were still moments of frustration, of course. Times when I wanted to throw my laptop out the window and go live in a yurt, far away from the complexities of modern technology. But those moments became fewer and further between. The stilettos, while still a bit wobbly, were starting to feel a little less precarious. One day, I was working on a project, completely absorbed in the flow of creation. My fingers danced across the keyboard, effortlessly navigating the once daunting interface. I wasn't thinking about the software anymore, I was just creating. And in that moment, I realized I'd finally conquered Creativo. It wasn't my comfy old slippers, no. It was more like a pair of well-worn hiking boots. Not always the most glamorous, but sturdy, reliable, and ready to take me on any creative adventure. So, what's the moral of the story? Persistence, I guess. And maybe a healthy dose of caffeine. But mostly, it's about embracing the challenge, even when it feels overwhelming. Because sometimes, the most rewarding experiences are the ones that push us outside our comfort zones. And who knows, maybe one day I'll even be able to rock those digital stilettos with confidence. You never know, right? Anyway, enough about my software saga. How about you? Any epic tech battles you've fought and won? I'd love to hear them. Learning a new language, especially speaking, can feel like climbing a mountain, but trust me, The view from the top is incredible. A hesitant word is better than silent fear. Think about it. Even a small, uncertain step forward is progress. Every word you try, no matter how shaky, builds your confidence and brings you closer to fluency. It's like lighting a small candle in a dark room. Each flicker adds more light to your journey. You are braver than you think, and every attempt counts. You know what? I've found a fun way to practice speaking that you can easily try anywhere, anytime. Imagine describing a historical event as if you were there. Picture yourself at the signing of the Declaration of Independence, or watching the first moon landing. Narrate what you see, hear, and feel. It's a simple but powerful way to boost your vocabulary, sentence structure, and storytelling skills, all while cooking dinner or walking your dog. Honestly, it feels a little bit like time travel. Do you also find yourself understanding what others say in English, but hesitating when it's your turn to speak? Feeling lost in group conversations is completely normal, especially when everyone's chattering away quickly. It's like trying to catch falling leaves in a whirlwind. But remember, every learner goes through this phase. It's part of the process, and it doesn't diminish your progress. Take a deep breath, focus on what you can say, and jump in when you feel ready. Speaking of feeling good, you will not believe what happened next. I was at the grocery store the other day and overheard someone say, "Have a fantastic day." It just made me smile so wide. And you know what? It sparked this thought. What's a phrase in English that always makes you smile? Share it in the comments. I'd love to hear what brings a little joy to your language learning journey. So, grab your tea, get comfy, because I have a story for you. It's about a visit to this, well, I guess you could call it a music venue. More like a dimly lit cave of echoing sound and spilled beer, really. But it holds a special, kind of melancholic, place in my heart. It was a drizzly Tuesday. Remember those kinds of Tuesdays? The ones where the sky just seems to weep for no particular reason and you feel this weird pull to, I don't know, wallow? Yeah, one of those Tuesdays. I was nursing a broken heart, not the dramatic, operatic kind, more like the slow, simmering kind, where you realize love is not a Nicholas Sparks novel but a damp, forgotten teabag in the back of your cupboard. You know what I mean? Anyway, I'd heard whispers about this place, the Rusty String, tucked away down a side street, behind overflowing bins and a perpetually flickering neon sign advertising exotic snacks. Exotic meaning probably a bag of stale chips and a lukewarm can of soda. Still, the allure of live music, a place to just disappear for a while, was too strong to resist. So there I was, hood up, damp through, pushing open the heavy door. The smell hit me first, a thick mixture of stale cigarette smoke, though I think smoking inside had been banned for like a decade, sweat, and something strangely metallic? Maybe it was the rusty strings they were talking about. The light inside was minimal, a few bare bulbs casting long, dramatic shadows that made everyone look like a character from a noir film. I almost expected Humphrey Bogart to emerge from a corner, cigarette dangling from his lips. The place was practically empty. A handful of souls scattered around chipped wooden tables, nursing their drinks and staring into the middle distance like they'd lost something precious and weren't quite sure where to look for it. I guess I fit right in. I grabbed a corner table, sticky with something unidentifiable, and ordered a lukewarm beer from the bartender, a woman with eyes that could probably tell your entire life story just by glancing at your shoes. She didn't speak much, just nodded, slid the beer across the counter, and went back to polishing glasses with a practiced, almost hypnotic, motion. The stage was basic. Let's just put it that way. A worn rug, a couple of mismatched mics, and a drum kit that looked like it had survived a natural disaster. But there was something authentic about it. No fancy lighting, no elaborate setup, just raw, unfiltered potential. And then the music started. Now, I can't even remember the band's name. Some local group trying to make a name for themselves, I guess. But the lead singer, the lead singer. He was this skinny guy with wild, unruly hair and eyes that burned with a kind of desperate intensity. He clutched his guitar like it was a lifeline, his fingers dancing over the strings with surprising agility. And his voice, it was rough, a little gravelly, but full of this raw emotion that just grabbed you. They started playing, and it wasn't anything groundbreaking, honestly. A little bluesy, a little folky, a little, I don't know, melancholy, just like the night, just like me. But there was something in the way they played, the way the music filled the space, that resonated with something deep inside me. The songs were about heartbreak, loss, the struggle to find your place in the world. You know, the usual stuff. But they weren't just singing words, they were pouring out their souls. And the handful of us in the audience, we were all in it together. We were this tiny island of shared sadness in a sea of indifference. I remember one song in particular. It was slow, almost hypnotic, with this haunting melody that just stayed with you. The lyrics were about a love that had faded, like a photograph left too long in the sun, bleached and almost unrecognizable. And as he sang, the lead singer's voice cracked, just a little, and I swear I saw a single tear trace a path down his cheek. And in that moment, I felt this connection. Like he was singing my story, my heartbreak, my lost love. It wasn't just a performance, it was a shared experience. We were all a little broken, a little lost, and the music, well, it was like a bandage on a wound. Not healing it entirely, but offering some kind of comfort, some kind of solace. The set ended, and the silence that followed was almost deafening. No one clapped, no one cheered. We just sat there, lost in our own thoughts, the echoes of the music still ringing in our ears. It was like we'd all been through something together, some kind of emotional pilgrimage. I finished my lukewarm beer, left a crumpled bill on the sticky table, and slipped back out into the drizzling night. The city lights seemed a little less harsh, the rain a little less cold. The music hadn't magically fixed my broken heart, but it had done something. It had reminded me that I wasn't alone. That even in the darkest, dampest corners of the city, there was beauty, there was connection, there was hope. Funny, isn't it, how sometimes the most unexpected places, the dingiest venues, can offer the most profound experiences. I never went back to the Rusty String. I don't even know if it's still there. But that rainy Tuesday night, that dimly lit cave of echoing sound, that handful of lost souls, it stays with me. A reminder that even in the gloom, there's always a flicker of light. You know what I mean, the kind of light that only music, raw and real, can ignite. It's a feeling, a memory, I treasure. Even now. So, you want to hear a story? Alright, pull up a chair, grab a biscuit, or a cuppa, whatever you fancy, and let me tell you about the day I repaired a bicycle. Now, this wasn't just any bicycle repair. This was an epic saga. A journey of self-discovery, grease, and a few choice words muttered under my breath. You know the kind? It all started with a sigh. A long, drawn-out, slightly melodramatic sigh, if I'm being honest. I was staring out the window, watching the world go by, feeling that particular brand of restlessness that only a beautiful sunny day and a distinct lack of purpose can bring. And then, my eyes landed on it. Leaning against the side of the garage, gathering dust and cobwebs, was my old bicycle. I hadn't ridden it in, well, let's just say it had been a while. Years, maybe? It was a rusty, dusty, sad-looking thing. The tires were flat, the chain sagged, and the once bright blue paint was faded and peeling. It looked less like a mode of transportation and more like a metal skeleton of its former self. But something about it called to me. Maybe it was the sunshine, maybe it was the boredom, or maybe, just maybe, it was a whisper of adventure. Suddenly, I had a mission. I was going to bring that bicycle back to life. Now, I'm not exactly mechanically inclined. I can change a light bulb, maybe assemble some IKEA furniture with a moderate amount of swearing, but bicycle repair? That felt like a whole different ball game. But, fueled by that initial burst of enthusiasm, and perhaps a touch of naive optimism, I marched out to the garage, determined to conquer this two-wheeled beast. The first hurdle, of course, was the tires. They were flatter than pancakes left out in the desert sun. I dug around in the garage and unearthed a rusty old pump. It looked like it had fought in World War II and lost. I attached it to the valve, and nothing. Absolutely nothing. The pump creaked and groaned, but the tire remained stubbornly flat. Right. Plan B. I rummaged through boxes of forgotten treasures, or, more accurately, junk we hadn't gotten around to throwing away, and eventually located a puncture repair kit. Now, I'd seen my dad use one of these things years ago, and it looked complicated. There were patches, glue, sandpaper, levers. It felt like performing open heart surgery on a rubber donut. I won't bore you with all the gory details, but let's just say it involved a lot of fumbling, a liberal application of glue, mostly on my fingers, and a few more choice words whispered to the unresponsive tire. Eventually, after what felt like an eternity, I managed to patch the hole, or at least cover it in enough glue that it looked patched. Then came the monumental task of inflating the tire with the ancient pump. It was a workout, let me tell you. My arms ached, my back protested, and I swear I saw stars. But finally, miraculously, the tire started to inflate. It was a slow, laborious process, but it was happening. With one tire inflated, I tackled the other one. This one, thankfully, didn't have a puncture. Just a serious case of deflation. Pumping it up was still a workout, but at least I didn't have to wrestle with glue and patches. Next up, the chain. It sagged like a sad, rusty hammock. I knew it needed oiling, but the oil can I found was practically fossilized. After wrestling with it for a while, I managed to coax out a few drops of thick, black goo. I applied it liberally to the chain, which promptly started to look like a greasy, black snake. Not exactly aesthetically pleasing, but hopefully functional. Then there were the brakes. They were, well, non-existent. Squeezing the levers resulted in nothing more than a faint squeak. I investigated and discovered that the brake pads were worn down to practically nothing. This, I knew, was beyond my limited repair skills. I made a mental note to visit the bike shop later. After a few more hours of tinkering, tightening, and generally fiddling around, the bicycle was starting to resemble something rideable. It wasn't pretty, but it was definitely an improvement. The tires were inflated, the chain was somewhat oiled, and even the rusty frame had a certain vintage charm, right? Right? I stood back and admired my handiwork. It wasn't perfect, not by a long shot. But it was mine. I had resurrected this forgotten piece of metal and transformed it into something, well, something that at least looked like it might move. The moment of truth. I tentatively swung my leg over the frame and sat down. The seat was hard, the handlebars wobbly, but it held. I pushed off, and I was moving. It was wobbly, squeaky, and the brakes were still questionable, but I was riding. The first few minutes were tentative. I wobbled, I swerved, I almost fell off a couple of times. But then, something amazing happened. I started to remember. I remembered the feeling of wind in my hair, the sun on my face, the freedom of two wheels. It was like rediscovering a lost part of myself. I rode around the neighborhood, feeling a giddy sense of accomplishment. The rusty old bicycle, once a symbol of neglect and forgotten memories, had become a symbol of resilience, resourcefulness, and the simple joy of fixing something with your own hands. Sure, it wasn't perfect. The brakes still needed fixing, the gears were clunky, and the whole thing rattled like a box of loose bolts. But it worked, and that, in that moment, was all that mattered. You know, it's funny how something as simple as repairing a bicycle can turn into such an experience. It wasn't just about fixing a bike. It was about rediscovering a lost passion, about challenging myself, about proving that even someone as mechanically challenged as myself could accomplish something tangible. It was about that feeling of satisfaction, of looking at something you've fixed with your own hands and saying, I did that. So, yeah, that's the story of the day I repaired a bicycle. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't easy, and it certainly wasn't perfect. But it was mine, and honestly, I wouldn't trade it for the world. Now, another biscuit? Hey everyone, learning a new language can feel like climbing a mountain, right? But you know what? The more you fail, the more you grow. Think about it. Every stumble, every hesitant word, every time you have to ask someone to repeat themselves, it's all part of the process. It's actually pushing you forward, building your resilience, and making you even stronger. So embrace those little failures, they're actually victories in disguise. And speaking of practice, I have a fun idea for you. Have you ever thought about pretending to be a tourist guide in your own city? Imagine you're showing a visitor around your favorite park, describing the historical buildings, or recommending the best local restaurants. You can do this while you're walking, cooking dinner, or even just tidying up. It's such a simple, easy way to get comfortable with speaking English out loud, and it's surprisingly enjoyable too. You will not believe what happened next. The other day I was at the grocery store, and I completely understood the cashier's question in English, but when it was my turn to reply, my mind went blank. It made me realize how many of us experience this. Wanting to speak, having the words in our heads, but waiting for the right moment, which never seems to arrive. It's completely normal, and you're not alone in feeling that way. Remember, progress isn't always linear. And you know what? It reminded me of something else. I've been trying to be more mindful of my own language learning journey, and it's made such a difference. Do you keep a journal or notes to track your English progress? Even just jotting down a few new words or phrases each day, or reflecting on a conversation you had, can be incredibly motivating. Honestly, it felt like magic seeing how far I've come. I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. Okay, so, you won't believe what happened to me the other day. It all started with a flower pot. Sounds simple, right? Nothing is ever simple when I get involved, especially when it involves nature. I have what you might call a complicated relationship with plants. They either thrive dramatically under my care or, well, let's just say they don't. There's not much in between. Anyway, I decided I wanted to add a little color to my balcony. It's kind of bleak. Concrete, metal railing, you know, the usual cityscape. So, I thought a splash of vibrant flowers would do the trick. I envisioned this cascading petunia situation, all pinks and purples, like a little piece of paradise suspended 10 stories above the street. So, off I went to the garden center. Now, garden centers are my happy place. The smell of damp earth, the rows and rows of green, it's intoxicating. I wander around touching leaves, sniffing blossoms. I'm like a kid in a candy store. Except, instead of candy, I buy plants that I may or may not subsequently kill. It's a vicious cycle, really. This time, I was determined to do things right. I picked out a beautiful terracotta pot. It was big, heavy, and had this lovely rustic charm. It felt substantial, you know? Like it meant business. Then came the petunias. Oh, the petunias. I must have spent a good half hour just gazing at them, trying to decide on the perfect shade. Finally, I settled on a mix of deep violet and a soft, almost iridescent pink. They looked so delicate, so full of promise. Then came the soil. Now, here's where things started to go a little sideways. I grabbed a big bag of potting mix, you know, the kind that's supposed to be perfect for everything? And a smaller bag of something. I don't even remember what it was. Some kind of soil amendment, I think. It promised vigorous growth and blooming brilliance. Who could resist? Certainly not me. I lugged everything back to my apartment, feeling quite proud of myself. It was a hot day, and I was sweating, but I was filled with this sense of purpose. Like I was about to embark on some great horticultural adventure. I set up shop on my balcony. Unrolled a plastic sheet to protect the concrete, because I'm messy, like that. And got to work. First, the pot. I placed a piece of broken pottery over the drainage hole. A trick I learned from a YouTube video. Apparently, it prevents the soil from washing away. See? I was learning. Then came the soil. And this is where it all went. A little bit pear-shaped. I opened the big bag of potting mix and it was dry. Like Sahara Desert dry. It was practically dust. And the soil amendment. It was like compressed peat moss bricks. Hard as a rock. I stared at them for a moment, feeling a familiar wave of gardening-related despair wash over me. What was I supposed to do with this stuff? The instructions were vague, something about adding water. But how much water? And how was I supposed to mix these two completely different substances together? I felt completely out of my depth. You know that feeling? Like you're standing at the edge of a swimming pool and suddenly realize you've forgotten how to swim. Well, that was me. Standing on my balcony, surrounded by dirt and flowers, feeling utterly clueless. So, I did what any sane person would do. I called my mom. Now, my mom is a gardening guru. She can grow anything, anywhere. She has this magical green thumb. I, on the other hand, inherited the other thumb. The brown one. My mom, bless her heart, patiently talked me through the process. Add water gradually, she said. Mix it thoroughly. Don't overwater. Simple, right? Easier said than done. I started adding water, bit by bit. The dry soil just soaked it up like a sponge. Then I tried to break apart the peat moss bricks. It was like wrestling with a miniature, earthy monster. Dust flew everywhere. I was coughing, spluttering, covered in dirt. My balcony looked like a small-scale volcanic eruption had just occurred. Eventually, after what felt like an eternity, I managed to create something resembling potting soil. It wasn't pretty, but it was moist. And that, I figured, was a start. I carefully placed the petunias in their new home, arranging them just so. I patted down the soil around their delicate stems, whispering words of encouragement. Grow, little ones, grow. I said, don't die on me. I stood back and admired my handiwork. It wasn't quite the cascading paradise I'd envisioned. The petunias looked a little shell-shocked, and the pot was covered in a fine layer of dirt. But they were planted, and that was a victory in itself. I cleaned up the mess, or at least, the worst of it, and went inside, feeling exhausted but strangely satisfied. Guess what happened next? The next morning, I went out to check on my little petunias. And you know what? They looked perky, like they'd actually enjoyed their near-death experience with the dry soil and the peat moss monster. One of them had even produced a new bud, a tiny, perfect, pink bud. It was a small thing, really. Just a tiny bud on a slightly dusty petunia. But it filled me with this ridiculous sense of accomplishment. Like I'd conquered Mount Everest, or solved world hunger. Okay, maybe that's a bit of an exaggeration. But you get what I mean, right? It's funny, isn't it? How something as simple as planting a flower pot can be so complicated. And yet, so rewarding. It's like a microcosm of life, I guess. Full of challenges and unexpected turns, but ultimately, full of beauty and potential. And who knows, maybe, just maybe, this time, my petunias will actually survive. And if they do, I'll be sure to tell you all about it. Over a cup of tea, of course. And maybe, just maybe, I'll even share some gardening tips. Though, given my track record, you might want to take those with a grain of salt. Or maybe a whole bag. You know what I mean? Okay, so grab a cuppa, settle in, because this story is an epic. It's about buying a gift for my sister, Chloe. Sounds simple, right? Oh, honey, you have no idea. Chloe is, well, she's Chloe. Unique, eclectic, impossible to shop for. It's like trying to pick out a star from the entire galaxy and hoping it fits in her pocket. You know what I mean? Her birthday was coming up, and I, being the best older sister ever, don't tell her I said that, wanted to get her something truly special. Something she wouldn't just like, but something that would make her eyes light up like the Christmas tree at Rockefeller Center. High bar, I know. So, the quest began. Weeks before her birthday, I started subtly probing. Hey, Chloe, I'd casually ask while we were binge-watching some cheesy reality show, if you could have anything in the world, what would it be? She'd just shrug and say something like, world peace? A lifetime supply of dark chocolate? Not helpful, Chloe, not helpful. Then I tried the direct approach. What do you want for your birthday? I asked, point blank. She gave me that look she always gives me. The one that says I'm simultaneously the most endearing and most annoying person she knows. Oh, anything, she'd say with a wave of her hand. Don't worry about it. But, I do worry about it. It's practically my job description as the older sister. So, I resorted to Plan C. Stalking. Not in a creepy way, of course. Just, you know, paying extra close attention. I started noticing little things. The way she'd linger in the vintage shops, admiring the quirky jewelry. The way she'd get lost in the aisles of the bookstore, stroking the spines of poetry collections. The way she'd spend hours sketching in her notebook, filling it with whimsical drawings of fantastical creatures. A light bulb went off. Handmade, unique, artistic. That was the key. I decided to get her something made, not just bought. But what? A painting? A sculpture? A hand-knitted sweater with a portrait of her cat on it? Okay, maybe not that last one. I wandered through craft markets, scrolled through Etsy until my eyes glazed over, and even considered taking a pottery class. Disaster averted. Then, one rainy afternoon, I stumbled upon a tiny shop tucked away in a cobbled alleyway. It was filled with the most beautiful stained glass, shimmering in the soft light filtering through the window. Suncatchers, lamps, jewelry boxes, all handcrafted, each one a miniature work of art. And then I saw it. Nestled amongst the vibrant colors, a small, delicate stained glass hummingbird. Its wings were a mosaic of blues and greens, catching the light and scattering it across the room like tiny jewels. It was suspended from a delicate silver chain, perfect for hanging in a window. Chloe loves hummingbirds. She's always saying they're like tiny, feathered fairies. I knew, right then and there, that this was it. The perfect gift. But, because this is my life and nothing is ever simple, there was a problem. The hummingbird was the last one. And it was expensive. Like, really expensive. Way more than I'd budgeted for. I stood there, staring at it, my heart doing a little tango between desire and practicality. I took a deep breath, pulled out my credit card, goodbye, next month's latte budget, and bought the darn hummingbird. The shopkeeper, a sweet old woman with twinkling eyes, carefully wrapped it in tissue paper and placed it in a small, velvet pouch. As I walked out of the shop, the rain had stopped, and a sliver of sunlight peeked through the clouds, illuminating the cobblestones. It felt like a sign. A good sign. Now, the next challenge. Wrapping the gift. I'm not exactly known for my wrapping skills. My gifts usually end up looking like they've been wrestled by a pack of rabid squirrels. But for Chloe, I wanted to make an effort. So I bought some fancy wrapping paper, a deep, rich purple, her favorite color, and some silver ribbon. I even watched a YouTube tutorial on how to tie a perfect bow. Guess what happened next? I still managed to make a mess of it. The bow looked lopsided, the paper was creased, and the whole thing screamed, wrapped by a 5-year-old. I sighed. Some things never change. Finally, Chloe's birthday arrived. We had a small gathering, just family and close friends, at her favorite little Italian restaurant. The aroma of garlic bread and marinara sauce filled the air, laughter echoed around the table, and Chloe, bless her heart, looked genuinely happy. After the cake and the singing, during which I may or may not have forgotten the words to Happy Birthday, it was time for presents. Chloe opened everyone's gifts with her usual grace and enthusiasm, even the slightly questionable ones. Looking at you, Aunt Mildred, and your crocheted toilet paper cover. Then, it was my turn. I handed her the slightly mangled package, my heart pounding in my chest. She looked at it, then at me, a playful smirk on her face. Did a squirrel wrap this? She asked, and I just groaned. She carefully tore open the paper, revealing the velvet pouch. She reached inside, pulled out the hummingbird, and silence. For a moment, she just stared at it, her breath catching in her throat. The light from the restaurant caught the stained glass, sending tiny rainbows dancing across her face. Then, slowly, a smile spread across her lips. It wasn't just a smile, it was a radiant smile, the kind that reaches your eyes and makes them sparkle. Oh, wow, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. It's beautiful. She held it up to the light, turning it this way and that, admiring the intricate details. It's perfect, she finally said, looking at me with those sparkling eyes. Thank you. And in that moment, all the stress, the searching, the wrapping struggles, the budget anxieties, it all melted away. Because that look on her face, that pure, unadulterated joy, that was worth more than all the lattes in the world. You know, it reminded me why I go through all the trouble, why I put myself through the gift-giving gauntlet every year. It's not just about the gift itself, it's about the connection, the shared moment of joy, the feeling of making someone you love feel truly special. And that, my friend, is priceless. So, yeah, buying a gift for my sister. It's a journey, a sometimes chaotic, often stressful, but always rewarding journey. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. Except maybe a lifetime supply of dark chocolate. Just kidding. Mostly, from the bottom of my heart, Thank you so much for watching and for staying connected with me throughout this video. It really means the world to me. I'd love it if you would follow, like, subscribe, and share so you don't miss any of my new daily content focused on helping you with English speaking and listening. You know, before we go, it made me wonder, are you planning to cook something special soon? It is always so lovely to hear what everyone is thinking about, and sharing your plans is a wonderful way to practice expressing yourself in English and connect with others in the comments. See you tomorrow, and remember to take good care of yourselves and keep practicing. You've got this.